and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we are doing something exciting. We're reviewing the first film in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, which, is a movie that I think we both grew up with.
Definitely.
Excited to be watching.
Yeah.
But who else was involved in the making?
So like we said, obviously directed by Sam Raimi. This movie was written by David Koepp. He is probably known for writing Jurassic Park, played a hand in writing the first Mission Impossible film with Tom Cruise, as well as a movie that we talked about here recently, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, despite the bad things we said about that movie. Not his fault. Based on the comic by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and this movie stars Tobey Maguire, Willem Dafoe, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Cliff Robertson, and Rosemary Harris. Music by Danny Elfman. This movie was released May 3rd of 2003, has a runtime of about 120 minutes, budget of $139 million, made about 121.7 at the box office, so pretty decent success.
Did it get really good? You know, it was probably the second major superhero film to really kick off the superhero craze.
Yeah, I think between this and X-Men is what really kicked off the
latest superhero craze, I guess.
The latest superhero craze. What we would say is, the modern wave of like the MCU and stuff like that. So.
Yeah. And like I mentioned, these are the Spider-Man movies that we grew up watching.
Yeah, these are definitely Spider-Man movies we grew up with.
I think of Spider-Man, this is the first thing I think of.
Automatically think of Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, so I'm always excited to go back and watch it. I'm sure you are too.
I mean, I've seen him a million times.
We've both seen it probably a million times, but no, I think this movie is when you look at it now, it may not be the most realistic or most serious superhero film.
No,
but,
it's definitely cheesy and campy. It has.
Yeah.
I haven't seen The Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2, which are pretty classic Raimi films.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, they're extremely campy.
Yeah.
Horror comedies, and I kind of get that vibe here. It's a very campy, kind of cheesy superhero movie.
Yeah.
And it just works for the tone of it.
Yeah.
Works for the tone. So.
I've seen the original Evil Dead, and it is campy, and obviously it's a much harder R.
Yeah.
But you can still see some of Raimi's horror influences in this film. There's some jump scares and some stuff like that, and maybe some of the Green Goblin stuff was influenced by his horror background, definitely. But no, I think that Sam Raimi did a great job directing this film.
Definitely.
Yeah, it is campy and cheesy in parts, but I think he does a pretty good job of balancing that with the more serious parts.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think even though it may not always mesh well together, I think it makes for a really fun movie.
Definitely. This movie is very entertaining. I mean, the action is top notch, especially for a movie coming out of 2002. Something kind of new to the genre. We didn't have a whole lot of this kind of action going on in the early 2000s, and we had a couple movies before, like Blade and X-Men, and maybe V for Vendetta came out like a year or two later, something like that. So something kind of different.
Yeah, but this had a much bigger budget than the first X-Men movie did. So that being said, the CGI is obviously dated.
It's definitely dated. It comes across pretty glossy, and there's some shots that you're like, ooh.
Yeah, and it doesn't, like when Spider-Man's like swinging and jumping around, it doesn't really feel like like there's a weight to him. Like he's just kind of floating through the air, and some of the green screen effects are a little sketchy.
They're a little sketch.
But
there's a couple shots with like toward the end, during the final climax with the trolley car or whatever. It's dangling against the background of that bridge. It's a little rough. You can see the outline of it added on there. It's kind of sketch.
But there's a lot of cool practical effects, a lot of cool practical explosions, pyrotechnics, and stuff like that. Costume design is great.
Definitely excellent.
For both.
And when I think of Spider-Man, this is the Spider-Man that I think of, and I think that's probably true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially people around our age. When they picture Spider-Man, they picture the Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit.
What do you think of Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man?
When I was a kid, I loved him. Now, I don't know that I would say he's the best Spider-Man. He definitely pulls off that nerdy vibe, and they really, really emphasize that he's super nerdy and kind of picked on at the beginning of this film by just like him dumping random knowledge that nobody cares about, and he's picked on the bus, and even the bus driver picks on him, stuff like that. So they're really pushing that. I think he does a good job with the Peter Parker aspect, and he's not bad at the Spider-Man aspect. He's not, as physically, in shape, I guess, as some of these other.
He doesn't have that, Chris Evans, Captain America transformation going on, but
I mean, he's still probably my favorite Spider-Man just because that's who I grew up
Yeah.
with, and that's who I'll always think of when I think of Spider-Man. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I think as Peter Parker, I buy him as Peter Parker because I can buy Tobey Maguire as this geeky loser, picked on kid. Even though everybody in this movie looks like they're 25, but that aside. But yeah, as Spider-Man, I don't, and this may not be totally his fault. This is probably some on the writing. I don't think he's as quippy and as snarky as you would typically
especially like now that we've gotten Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's known for having these like cheesy one-liners and just quick quips with his villains and stuff like that. And we saw that in the Mark Webb movies and then the newest ones. And he doesn't really do that here. He kind of just is.
Yeah, and that's from the comics too. And I think some of that's on the writing, and I don't think Tobey Maguire he's not like a Robert Downey Jr. that can just
he doesn't just ooze charisma.
Yeah.
So.
But no, I agree with you. I mean, if I still had to pick a favorite Spider-Man, I really like Tom Holland.
Holland is great. Tom Holland, I think he embodies the young aspect, obviously because he's younger when he started playing him.
And he looks
younger. The part. But he's just, he's really fun, energetic.
But we'll talk about him eventually. But I like Tobey Maguire. He's probably still my favorite overall. But yeah, I do think as times after he puts on the suit, which he doesn't put on the suit until almost an hour
55 minutes in.
Almost an hour into this movie, about halfway through this movie, because it is an origin story, and it's a really good origin story. I think they do a great job of setting up Spider-Man and doing all that. Sometimes
this is definitely the first time we saw it on the big screen, so it works really well.
Sometimes during origin stories, I can get really bored and everything, but no, I think they do a pretty good job here in setting up the emotional trauma and all that. And I think they do a lot of that great stuff, with setting up, his relationship with his aunt and uncle, and
setting up his relationship with MJ, kind of
setting up his relationship with Harry, and then and Norman,
and definitely stuff that would come back in the next two movies too, setting up these relationships and setting up these arcs that would play out through the next two films after this one. I think that's where the writing really shines, the way that we've set up these characters to continue on the arc through two more films.
Yeah, but I think the strength of this movie is its action sequences. They're a lot of fun. I think the acting, I like, we were talking about Tobey Maguire. I like Tobey Maguire. I really like Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe in this movie is great. He's a fantastic villain. We'll talk about Spider-Man 2. I don't think he's quite as good as Alfred Molina, but just
I don't know. It's a different kind of villain.
It's a different kind of villain, yeah. The way, but you could tell Willem Dafoe when he walked into this was just having a lot of fun. It seems like he's really hamming it up and giving it all.
He's just Bill and Willem Dafoe. I like J.K. Simmons a lot. Obviously, he's great as J. Jonah Jameson. Weak points. I don't like Kirsten Dunst.
Kirsten Dunst, her line delivery in a lot of scenes is lackluster to say.
And then
her whole dialogue or monologue or whatever to Peter Parker at the end of the movie at Norman's funeral.
Yeah.
Her line delivery through that entire scene, even when I was a kid, I was like, "Oh, I don't like this." It just comes across really awkward.
And this is not her fault, but at the end of the movie, she just screams constantly. I'm just like, shut up. I just don't really care for her too much. James Franco is good as a Harry Osborn,
and he'll play bigger roles in the next two movies.
Yeah, so. Unfortunately. Just kidding. But yeah, acting overall is really good, and I think most of the people are doing a great job. And then what's the lady that plays Aunt May?
Rosemary Harris.
Rosemary Harrison. She does a good job as Aunt May.
She's a good Aunt May.
Although I do have a question. It's like, why is this aunt and uncle so old?
Like at one point, I guess you said, I guess I forgot.
He said,
I've caught it before.
He said he was 68.
How old are his parents?
That's what I was wondering. Like, it would make more. Now I know obviously they pulled this from the comics. It'd make more sense looking at their age if they were his grandparents raising him. But it's whatever. But yeah, I think this movie's a lot of fun. I enjoy it
definitely
quite a bit. So anyway, was there anything else you wanted to talk about while we were talking about it?
I guess so.
All right, you ready for Buy It, Stream It, Skip It?
Go for it.
Okay, well, obviously this is still one of my favorite superhero movies. It's still probably one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. I think Sam Raimi did a great job of bringing Spider-Man to the big screen for technically the first time, I guess. I think it's a really fun movie. Yeah, it is cheesy and campy at times, but I think that helps add to the fun element of this movie. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's like some of the more modern superhero movies. And it looks like the cast, for the most part, is having a lot of fun making this movie. I think Tobey Maguire is a good Peter Parker, even if he's not a great Spider-Man per se. But costume design is great. Willem Dafoe as the Green Goblin was a perfect casting choice.
Definitely.
J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is a great casting choice. Yeah, MJ gets on my nerves at times, but as a whole, I think this is a really fun movie. I love the action sequences. Some dated effects aside, I think they're a lot of fun. And for Sam Raimi, who did mostly low budget horror movies before this, I think it was really impressive what he was able to do with this movie. And
Definitely.
I think his horror background helps him to bring some cool stuff to this movie too, with especially in the Green Goblin parts of this movie and things like that. So yeah, for me, it's definitely a buy it. It's still, like I said, I think one of the better superhero movies out there.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to also say buy it. I have it right back there. Fancy steelbook. But, I mean, this movie's fantastic. I still think it's fantastic. I've loved it since I was a kid, since the first time I saw it back in 2002. And I've watched it constantly since. I mean, we were sitting there and I was quoting lines, and I kept looking over to Andrew, and I was like, I've seen this movie way too many times, which I really have. I've seen this movie so much. I mean, I could probably sit and quote almost the entire movie. I love it. I think the acting all around is for the most part pretty well done. Kirsten Dunst is okay, but like you said, Willem Dafoe is a perfect casting choice for this villainous movie as the Green Goblin. Just his persona and the way he portrays himself in the movie is incredible, and he's definitely, you can tell, it seems to me like he's having a lot of fun. He's just hamming it up. I don't know if he's just acting himself or if he's just doing what he does best, but he's great. J.K. Simmons is also a fantastic casting choice, and he would, be one of the standouts of the series for the next, couple movies, and stand out enough that they would bring him back and at the very end for a post-credit scene in Far From Home. But the action sequences, I think, are fantastic in this movie, like you said, despite a few dated effects, which kind of hinder the movie, but, it's almost 20 years old now, so... but overall, I mean, I still think it's a fantastic movie. It's still one of the best Spider movies out there. It's still one of the best superhero movies out there. And what Sam Raimi was able to accomplish coming from that horror background, like you said, is really impressive with this really large budget and such a well-known character at the time. Bringing his first major big portrayal to the big screen is really impressive. And between this and X-Men, how it just kicked off that superhero genre. It's really, really good. So it's definitely a buy for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, we will continue this trilogy, and we will, over the next couple of weeks, finish off the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy.
Spider-Man 2 next week. Spider-Man 3 probably the same week at this point in time.
But other than that, what other stuff do we got coming up?
Yeah.
Yeah. We got some stuff.
Our schedule is all kinds of jacked, so let me see what we have planned tentatively as of right now.
Tentatively.
Tentatively.
We're going to run that joke into the ground.
Let's see.
We have Bill and Ted.
Looks like we're probably going to do Bill and Ted 1 and 2, followed by Kingsman 1 and 2. And then the same week that we do the second Kingsman movie, Bill and Ted 3 will hopefully be out. As well as Tenet should hopefully be out around that same time. Other than that, we're going to continue our Christopher Nolan series. Tenet should hopefully be out September the 3rd. Fingers crossed. Dear Lord, I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go see that. Other than that, we got a couple things planned. I think like the Wonder Woman movies. We're going to do a Candyman retrospective, some other stuff. So lots of stuff to look forward to. Other than that, if you like hearing us talk, we do have a podcast if Aaron wants to tell you about it.
That's right. Every Tuesday, we release an episode over a different giant monster movie. That podcast is called Stomp This Way. You can find it on all major pod hosting services.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think that's all we got for you this week. So as always, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.
Absolutely. And if you want to follow us on our social medias, we're still at DNA Film Wars on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So make sure you give us a like or follow. Be sure to tell your friends about us.
That's right. And all that being said, we'll see you next week with Spider-Man 2.
Catch you guys in the next one.